very much.
Jose Antonio Caballero, Dean of City Law School at Mexico City and Justice Administration Specialist.
Everything save for the Justice Administration Specialist is really, that I'm not very sure about. Anyway, Samuel and Jose Ruben depicted a pretty grim picture of what's the war on drug policy currently in my country. What I will focus is, I will try to focus more on the policy and the way regulation is being drafted. In particular, what has to do with the justice system, and that's where I will center. I will discuss basically the latest statute on what has been, not with very much precision, called some sort of legalization of drugs in Mexico. A few months ago, some of you may have noticed, there was a forum in the New York Times where several persons discussed if Mexico was actually legalizing drugs. I do want to start by saying that it amazed me pretty much that many of the people who actually wrote those articles were not very well informed as to the facts of the regulation. So I will focus a little bit on my perspectives and what came out, or what's behind the policies that came out with this regulation. And then Alejandro Madrazo will provide us with some data that will document our optimism or our pessimism. I don't know. Anyway, here we go. Drug regulation in Mexico is a federal issue. State and city police corps don't have a formal intervention in drugs. So basically, if you're a city policeman or you're a state policeman, technically speaking, you don't have to do anything against drugs. Strictly speaking, you could argue that if there's some flagrancy, of course you would need to do something. But this is when things get in a rather gray area. So basically, one of the main policies behind the regulation reform was, let's enforce from a local perspective the situation about drugs. That's one of the most important. Federal prosecutors are the responsible for any issues that have to do with drugs. At that point then, the federal prosecutors would say, since we're dealing with big-time drug dealers, we might as well let local policemen and state policemen to deal with minor drug dealers. And that would be basically one of the biggest premises behind this regulation. Let's just get everybody, or let's make sure that everybody is involved in this whole situation. So that would be like a broad picture. What's a legal strategy? First, there was a constitutional amendment. In Mexico, we love to amend our constitution. That's one of the most important national sports. Federal and state officials, basically, we amended the constitution so federal and state officials can prosecute these cases. One of the gray areas is when or who's doing what. Essentially, the rule is basically that federal officials can decide when they go in and when they don't go in. This could be easy to say, but it actually presents several problems of coordination. For example, sometimes there's a murder that has clearly all the signs of an organized criminal group, and that has to do with drugs maybe, and then they let only state officials deal with it. And that has a lot of coordination problems, which I won't, I just won't refer. Anyway, I would use this, the idea of this whole regulation in two verbs, criminalize and prevent. But the statute itself gives me, or may give you a very clear idea of what the regulation is looking for. For criminalization, state forces have 1 year to adapt themselves and to start applying the new regulation. So basically the idea to criminalize is what you would emphasize in this. The regulation also has a very large preventive or prevention chapter. However, the prevention chapter will take 3 years to take into place. My comment, and that would be my conclusion, like one of my conclusions, is that we're doing the things on the other way. We should probably begin by preventing, but let me just go. A new regulation does not legalized. This is something I do want to underline. It regulates what was already a crime. Essentially, before this regulation, if you were caught with a certain substance that was a forbidden substance, and the prosecutor would consider that that did not mean trafficking or even dealing, and it was completely discretional, they would basically let you go. They wouldn't carry out, or they wouldn't present a formal accusation against you. The regulation, or the change in regulation, means that if you are caught now with some forbidden substance, you might not necessarily be prosecuted, but you'd be formalized inside the system. So the possibility of being prosecuted in these cases is even higher. And even higher for several other problems that I will focus at some point in my presentation. I'm trying to go very quickly, sorry for just this.